Imagine finding out your wife is cheating on you and the love of your life is waiting for you on the other side. What my new wife did to my ex-wife is a shock. My wife, Amanda, and I had been married for 10 years. I thought we had a solid relationship, built on years of trust, companionship, and memories. We'd been through a lot together, ups and downs, good times and rough patches, but we'd always managed to come out stronger, or so I thought. But lately, something had changed. Amanda had always been an affectionate person, full of laughter and warmth, but over the past few months, she'd grown distant. She'd become more invested in her appearance, spending hours at the gym, buying new clothes that didn't quite fit her usual style, and making constant visits to the salon. I told myself she was just focused on self-care, maybe trying to feel her best as she was hitting her 40s. But deep down, a quiet unease had started to grow. And then there were the late work meetings. Amanda had always worked hard, but suddenly, these meetings seemed to pop up more frequently, often extending well into the evening. I'd call her phone, only to have it go to voicemail, or she'd answer with a rushed tone, explaining that she was just busy. When she came home, there was an excitement in her eyes, an energy that wasn't meant for me. One evening, as she got ready for yet another meeting, I couldn't help but ask, "Amanda, are you sure everything's all right? You've been working so late lately, and it feels like we barely see each other." She paused, looking at me through the mirror with a perfectly calm expression. I know," she said, smoothing down her dress. "It's just a busy season at work, that's all. We'll make time for each other soon, okay?" I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think she was just caught up in her career. But as she walked out the door, something in her voice, the way she avoided my eyes, gnawed at me. Little did I know, that busy season was about to shatter everything I thought I knew about my marriage. After that evening, things between us only got stranger. Amanda became almost obsessively private with her phone, something she'd never cared about before. She'd keep it close, checking it frequently, and quickly flipping it over whenever I walked into the room. It felt like she was creating a barrier between us, a wall that I didn't know how to break through. Then, there were her appearances. She started wearing makeup more often, even on days she wasn't working. I noticed her wardrobe had changed too, gone were the simple clothes she'd always felt comfortable in, replaced by trendy outfits that seemed out of place. When I'd comment on how nice she looked, she'd shrug it off, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. One weekend, I suggested we go out for a nice dinner, just the two of us, like old times. I thought it would be a way to reconnect, to bring back some of the spark that felt like it was slipping away. But Amanda declined, saying she'd already made plans to catch up with friends. I nodded, trying to act like I didn't mind, but it stung. We used to share everything, tell each other everything. And now, I felt like I was living with a stranger who only shared the surface details of her life. One night, after she'd fallen asleep, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together everything that had changed. There were too many little things that didn't add up, and a nagging voice in my mind started asking questions I didn't want to answer. Could it be that she was hiding something? Or worse, someone? I shook off the thought, refusing to believe it. But that feeling wouldn't go away. A few weeks later, my worst fears began to unfold. Amanda had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she ran upstairs to grab something, and, almost instinctively, I found myself glancing down at it. The screen was still lit up, showing a recent text from a contact saved as Ben Rose. Something in my gut twisted. I didn't know a Ben. And that little rose emoji next to his name, something she'd never used with any of her other friends, felt out of place. My heart pounded as I hesitated, unsure whether I should look, but curiosity and a growing sense of dread got the better of me. The text preview on her screen read, "Can't wait to see you tonight. I've been thinking about you all day." A wave of nausea hit me. I scrolled through the messages, each one driving the truth deeper. They weren't just casual friends. The texts were filled with affectionate phrases, playful banter, and hints of intimacy that Amanda had once reserved for me. I felt like I'd stumbled into someone else's relationship, like I was looking into a world I hadn't been invited to join. My hands shook as I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it, every muscle in my body tense with shock and disbelief. The reality was clear, Amanda wasn't just drifting away. She was involved with someone else. And it wasn't just anyone, it was someone younger, someone she'd chosen over the life we'd built together. When she came back downstairs, I forced a neutral expression, though my mind was racing with questions and anger. She looked at me, oblivious, and smiled as she picked up her phone, scrolling casually through it as though it were a normal day. But nothing about this was normal. I spent the next day in a daze, going over every interaction, every excuse Amanda had given me in recent months. My anger simmered, but so did the realization that I needed to approach this carefully. Exploding in rage wouldn't give me the answers I needed, I wanted the truth, every last bit of it. I wanted to see if she'd admit to what she'd been hiding. That evening, I decided to confront her. When she walked through the door, her smile faded as she noticed me sitting on the couch, waiting. "Hey, everything okay?" she asked, her tone a little too casual. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. "I want to talk, Amanda. About us." I watched her carefully as I spoke, looking for any flicker of guilt or surprise. "I feel like we've been growing apart, and I think we both know something's not right." She hesitated, glancing down, and I could tell she was buying time, trying to read me. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "I think you know exactly what I mean," I replied, my voice calm but unyielding. "Who is Ben?" Her face went pale. She tried to compose herself, but I'd already seen the flash of panic in her eyes. For a second, I thought she might deny everything, play it off, but instead, she let out a shaky sigh and looked away. "It's complicated," she finally said, barely above a whisper. Complicated. The word stung. We'd built a life together, shared everything, and she was willing to risk it all for something she considered complicated. I waited, watching her struggle, but my silence seemed to push her. "Ben, he's just someone I met a few months ago," she admitted. "We started talking, and I didn't expect things to go this far. I didn't mean to hurt you, Matt." Hurt didn't begin to cover what I was feeling, but I kept my composure, pushing down the waves of anger. "So what happens now? Are you planning on staying with him?" She looked down, her silence confirming what I'd dreaded. That was the answer I'd needed, but it didn't make it hurt any less. She had already decided, our life together wasn't enough for her anymore. Her silence said more than words ever could. Amanda had made her choice, and it wasn't me. The person I thought I'd known for years was now sitting across from me, looking like a stranger who had made up her mind to leave. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice as steady as I could manage. "How long has this been going on, Amanda?" I asked, my eyes fixed on her, hoping for some shred of honesty. She looked down, her fingers twisting nervously. "A few months," she admitted quietly. "At first, it was just something new. Someone who made me feel young again. I didn't plan for it to happen, Matt, but I don't know. I just felt different with him." Her words twisted like a knife. Different. I wondered if she ever thought about the life we'd built, or if she'd been so focused on this new feeling that she was willing to throw everything away. "What is it, Amanda?" I asked, struggling to understand. "Why him? Why someone younger?" She hesitated, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an answer she hadn't prepared for. "He's just exciting, Matt. He doesn't know all my flaws or my past. With him, I feel like I can be anyone, like I don't have to think about responsibility or routines or any of it. I can just be free." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. After all these years, she wanted to feel free from me, free from the life we'd built together. So what now? I asked, my voice breaking slightly despite my best efforts. Are you really leaving? Leaving all of this? She looked at me, sadness mixed with guilt. I don't know, she whispered, her voice shaky. I didn't want it to come to this. I didn't want to hurt you. But I think I already have. Her confession, raw and selfish as it was, felt like the closing of a chapter. I knew then that this was no longer about us or our life together, it was about her pursuit of something new, something she believed would fulfill her in ways I no longer could. And in that moment, I felt the weight of acceptance. She was no longer mine to hold on to. After Amanda's confession, the weight of everything crashed down on me. I left the house that evening, my mind reeling, and ended up at a bar a few blocks away. I was numb, drowning in a mixture of anger, sadness, and disbelief. The life I'd known was unraveling, and I didn't know how to deal with it. Drink after drink, I tried to numb myself, trying to forget her words, trying to forget that she'd chosen someone else. At some point, a woman sat down next to me. Her name was Emily, and she had a warm smile, a quick laugh, and a way of making me feel seen, if only for a moment. We started talking, and somewhere in the haze of our conversation, I found myself inviting her back to my place. I wasn't thinking clearly, wasn't thinking about anything except escaping the reality that Amanda had left me with. And in that haze, bringing Emily home felt like a small rebellion against the pain. The night passed in a blur. Emily and I shared brief moments of connection, but they were hollow, filling the space left by a relationship that was already broken. She stayed the night, and in the early hours of the morning, I was still half asleep when I heard the front door creak open. My heart stopped. Amanda had come home. The morning after. Amanda walked in, her expression unreadable as she saw Emily's shoes by the door, her coat draped over the armchair. She didn't say a word. She just took a deep breath, looked around briefly, then walked upstairs to our bedroom. I watched her, my heart racing, waiting for the explosion, the confrontation, something that would acknowledge the betrayal we'd both contributed to. But nothing. She didn't yell, didn't accuse. She calmly grabbed a suitcase from our closet and began packing her things, moving around the room with a quiet determination that was more painful than any argument could have been. I finally managed to find my voice. Amanda, I started, unsure of what I was even trying to say. She paused, giving me a tired, almost detached look. There's nothing left to talk about, Matt, she said quietly. I think we both know that. Her reaction, so calm, so devoid of any emotion, left me stunned. It was as if she'd already made peace with leaving. No anger, no jealousy, no heartbreak, just a cold acceptance that I hadn't expected. She gathered the last of her things, closed her suitcase, and turned to leave. As she walked past me, she stopped briefly, her gaze distant. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, Matt. And with that, she walked out the door, not looking back. The silence that followed was deafening. I realized then that whatever love she'd once felt was gone, replaced by an emptiness that I'd never seen in her before. And as I stood there, alone in a house that felt hollow, the reality of our broken marriage hit me harder than ever. In the weeks that followed Amanda's departure, the silence in our house was overwhelming. Everywhere I turned, there were reminders of her, a forgotten sweater, a framed photo, even the scent of her perfume lingering in the air. I knew I needed a way to escape, to put some distance between myself and the memories. And so, I threw myself into a new relationship, hoping it would be enough to pull me out of the darkness I'd been living in. Emily, the woman I'd met that night at the bar, became a surprising source of comfort. She was warm, empathetic, and surprisingly understanding about the messy situation I was in. I'd reached out to her after that night, feeling almost guilty for how I'd used her as a distraction, but she didn't seem to mind. She saw the pain I was carrying, and instead of running away, she leaned in. Our just-for-fun outings quickly turned into something more consistent. We'd meet for coffee, catch a movie, or just take walks in the park, where our conversations gradually became more personal. Emily didn't pry, didn't push, she was simply there, letting me open up at my own pace. With her, I felt a sense of lightness I hadn't experienced in months. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself smiling more often, laughing at things I'd once overlooked. Emily's presence grounded me, helping me remember that there was life beyond my failed marriage. We'd talk about everything, from childhood dreams to career plans, and in those moments, I felt myself coming alive again, like a piece of me had been brought back from a place I'd thought I'd lost forever. One afternoon, as we were sitting on a bench by the river, Emily turned to me, a thoughtful look in her eyes. "You seem different, Matt. Lighter, somehow," she said, smiling. "Like you're starting to let go." I nodded, realizing she was right. A month had passed since Amanda had walked out, and though I wasn't completely healed, I was no longer drowning. I'd stopped looking for answers or closure. I'd stopped wondering what went wrong and started focusing on what could go right. With Emily, I felt a genuine connection, a companionship that felt fresh and unburdened by the pain of the past. It wasn't a perfect solution, and I knew I still had healing to do. But for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, there was a new life waiting for me, a life that didn't revolve around Amanda or the hurt she'd left behind. And as the days went by, I found myself more willing to embrace that new beginning. A few more weeks passed, and my relationship with Emily continued to deepen in ways I hadn't expected. Just when I thought I'd lost faith in love, she brought it back, one simple, honest moment at a time. She showed me a path forward that didn't involve holding on to pain or clinging to the past. With Emily, I could see a real future, a fresh start built on mutual respect and trust. Then one evening, as we were having dinner at her place, she took my hand, a slight tremor in her touch. "Matt, there's something I need to tell you," she said, her eyes searching mine with a mix of excitement and nervousness. I felt my heart skip a beat. "What's going on?" I asked, a little worried but hopeful at the same time. She took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." The words hit me like a lightning bolt. I stared at her, feeling a rush of emotions all at once, surprise, joy, and a sense of responsibility that was both thrilling and humbling. Emily was going to have a child. Our child. I could see the glimmer of fear in her eyes as she waited for my response, but deep down, I knew what I wanted. This was my chance to move forward and build a life with someone who truly cared for me. My path became clear in that moment. I knew that to fully commit to this future with Emily, I needed to sever the last ties to my past. I needed to finalize things with Amanda and put everything behind me for good. I took Emily's hand, smiling at her as I let the reality of our future sink in. "We're in this together," I assured her. "I'll take care of everything. We'll make this work." The next day, I contacted my lawyer and started the formal divorce proceedings. I thought that the final step in leaving my past behind would be a simple, quiet process. Amanda and I had been separated for months, and she'd made it clear that her interests lay elsewhere. With Emily's pregnancy, I knew it was time to make everything official. So, without hesitation, I contacted my lawyer and filed for divorce, believing it would be an easy transition that Amanda wouldn't resist. But just days after filing, I received unexpected news. Amanda wasn't going to make this easy, she was contesting the divorce. I was blindsided. We hadn't spoken much since she left, and she'd seemed perfectly content with her new life. But now, she'd done a complete turnaround, and it looked like she intended to make the process as difficult as possible. Amanda's resistance felt like a strange attempt to hold on to something she no longer wanted. The court documents revealed she was challenging not only the divorce but was also trying to claim assets we'd both agreed to leave untouched. Her reasoning? Emotional distress and irreconcilable differences that, she argued, I was somehow responsible for. It was a bitter move that left me reeling. Emily, meanwhile, was supportive, though understandably worried. This trial meant dragging out the process and potentially affecting our plans for the future, including the stability we wanted for our baby. She urged me to stay calm, to not let Amanda's sudden change of heart derail our goals. But it was hard. This was supposed to be a clean break, a fresh start, and now it felt like Amanda was intent on keeping me in her orbit, refusing to let me move on. With no other option, I geared up for the legal battle, gathering every piece of evidence I had to prove that our marriage had effectively ended months ago. I had text messages, details of her affair, and testimony from friends who had witnessed the breakdown. My lawyer assured me we had a strong case, and that Amanda's sudden claim for support likely wouldn't stand up in court. As frustrating as it was, I realized that this was Amanda's last attempt to control a situation she'd created. She wasn't fighting for our relationship, she was fighting to regain some power over my life, power she'd lost the moment she'd chosen to leave. And as I prepared for the trial, I felt more resolute than ever. I was determined to close this chapter once and for all, to break free from Amanda's hold, and to create a future with Emily in our child, a future built on trust, not manipulation. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I walked into that courtroom with a sense of resolve, ready to face whatever Amanda and her lawyer had prepared. Emily had given me a reassuring smile that morning, reminding me of the future we were building together. Whatever happened, I knew I had her support. But as soon as Amanda's lawyer stood to speak, my confidence faltered. Her lawyer announced that Amanda was 4 months pregnant. The courtroom fell silent, and a murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. I felt a rush of shock as Amanda's lawyer stated that Amanda claimed this child was mine. I glanced over at Amanda, her expression carefully composed. She looked back at me with a confident gaze, as if she'd already decided the outcome of this trial in her favor. My mind raced, replaying the timeline. 4 months ago, it was right around the time we had still been together, before our separation became final. Amanda's lawyer continued, insisting that her pregnancy was the reason she was contesting the divorce so heavily. According to them, this was our child, and Amanda wanted financial support to provide a stable life for the baby. I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on me, their judgments palpable, but I kept my composure. The judge listened and then turned to me. "Mr. Adams, given these claims, I'm ordering an expedited DNA test to determine paternity. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks to discuss further proceedings." I nodded, outwardly calm but seething inside. I couldn't believe Amanda was dragging me into this, especially now. If the child was mine, I would be there for them, no question. I wasn't going to turn my back on my own child. In fact, if this was my child, I intended to sue for custody and raise them in a stable, loving environment, something Amanda had proven she couldn't provide. As I left the courtroom that day, I felt surprisingly at peace. Whatever happened, I knew my path forward. If the child was mine, they'd have a father who was fully committed to giving them the best life possible. And if not, it would be the final proof of Amanda's manipulations, one more reason to close this chapter once and for all. With a clear mind, I headed home to Emily, who was waiting to hear how it had gone. And together, we braced ourselves for the outcome, knowing that, whatever happened, we'd handle it together. The 2 weeks leading up to the DNA test results felt like a lifetime. Emily and I did our best to stay calm, but the uncertainty was always there, hanging over us like a dark cloud. She was supportive, her strength a quiet reminder that no matter what happened, we would face it together. Still, the thought of Amanda's sudden announcement lingered in my mind. If the child was mine, I was ready to take on full responsibility. I would pursue custody and give them the life they deserved. But if the test proved otherwise, it would be the final straw, the undeniable proof that Amanda had once again tried to manipulate a situation to her advantage. Either way, the truth was coming, and I felt more than ready to face it. The day of the next court hearing arrived. I felt an odd calmness as I walked into the courtroom, Emily by my side for support. Amanda was already there, her demeanor composed, almost smug, as if she was certain the outcome would work in her favor. The judge entered, bringing the room to a tense silence. After some formalities, the judge addressed the court. "We have received the results of the paternity test," he announced, his tone steady. "Mr. Adams, it has been determined that you are not the biological father of Mrs. Adams' child." The words echoed in the room, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. I felt a rush of relief mixed with frustration, relief that I wasn't tied to Amanda any longer, and frustration over the lengths she'd gone to in order to manipulate me. I glanced at Amanda, watching as her composure faltered for the first time. Her face went pale, her expression shifting from smug confidence to shock and embarrassment. She hadn't anticipated this outcome. Clearly, she had expected me to accept her story without question, but the truth was out now, and there was no hiding from it. The judge cleared his throat, looking directly at Amanda. "Mrs. Adams, I hope you understand the severity of your actions. You knowingly made a false claim, attempting to manipulate the court and deceive your former spouse. This is a serious matter, and it will be noted in these proceedings." Amanda looked down, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Whatever she had hoped to gain had crumbled in that instant. Her plan to control me with the claim of a child had backfired entirely. The judge then turned to me. "Given the circumstances, I am prepared to proceed with the divorce on the original terms, without financial support to Mrs. Adams. This court sees no grounds to delay the dissolution of this marriage any further." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of finality as the judge's gavel came down. It was over, truly over. As we left the courtroom, I felt lighter than I had in months. Emily squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with relief and pride. We had finally reached the end of this twisted chapter. There was no more waiting, no more questioning, just a clear path forward, a future that Amanda would no longer be able to manipulate or control. I was free, fully and completely. And as we walked out of the courthouse, I knew one thing for sure: the life Emily and I would build would be one of honesty, commitment, and love, a stark contrast to the lies and betrayals I'd left behind. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt like a huge weight had been lifted. The truth had come to light, and Amanda's final attempt to control my life had failed. I was free, free from the lies, the manipulation, and the constant uncertainty that had plagued me for months. As Emily and I walked hand in hand to the car, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. We spent the next few days savoring the freedom that came with this fresh start. Emily was visibly relieved, and our bond grew even stronger. She had stood by me through every twist and turn, facing the chaos with resilience and unwavering support. I knew I'd found someone who truly understood commitment, someone who was here for the long haul. With Amanda officially behind me, I could finally focus on building the life I wanted with Emily. We found ourselves talking more about the future, what kind of home we wanted to create, what dreams we both had, and most importantly, how we wanted to raise our child together. The conversations felt easy and natural, a complete contrast to the strained atmosphere that had dominated my life with Amanda in those final months. One day, we decided to look for a new place, a home that would be ours from the ground up, free of the memories that lingered in the old one. We toured a few houses and finally found one that felt just right, a cozy, sunlit space with a yard and room to grow our family. Standing in that empty living room with Emily, I could envision it all, a life full of warmth, honesty, and love. While packing up my old place, I came across the few remaining reminders of Amanda. An old photo tucked in a drawer, a sweater left behind. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness, not for her, but for the life we'd almost built, the dreams we'd once shared. But those feelings were fleeting. I knew now that the person I'd once loved was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. I tossed the old mementos into a box and left it at the back of a closet, letting the past stay where it belonged. It was time to let go, to close the door completely, and look ahead with hope. As we settled into our new home, I found myself more grateful than ever for Emily and the life we were creating. Every day felt like a gift, a chance to build something real, rooted in trust and understanding. We painted the walls, decorated the nursery, and filled the house with laughter and plans for the future. One evening, as we were setting up the nursery, Emily looked over at me, her face glowing. "You know, Matt," she said softly, "sometimes you have to go through a storm to really appreciate the calm on the other side." She was right. Amanda's betrayal had hurt deeply, but it had also led me to a place of clarity, a life filled with people who truly cared. And as I looked around at the home we'd built, I knew that everything, the pain, the struggle, even the heartbreak, had brought me here, to a life I was finally proud of. I was ready for whatever the future held, grateful for a fresh start and the promise of new beginnings. Just as we were beginning to settle into our new life, something happened that neither of us could have anticipated. One rainy Saturday afternoon, as Emily and I were finishing up setting up the nursery, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Amanda standing there, drenched and looking visibly shaken. It took me a moment to process her presence, as I hadn't expected to see her again, especially not on the doorstep of the home I now shared with Emily. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "Matt," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I need to talk to you. Please, it's important." A mix of anger and confusion swirled within me. After everything that had happened, the lies, the court battle, the DNA test, it was surreal to have her here, asking for more. I wanted to turn her away, to tell her that she no longer had any place in my life, but something about her expression stopped me. Against my better judgment, I nodded and stepped aside, letting her in. Emily stood by the doorway to the nursery, watching cautiously as Amanda walked into the living room. The tension was thick, and I could see the hurt in Emily's eyes, but she gave me a nod, letting me know she trusted me to handle this. Amanda took a deep breath, visibly gathering herself. "I know this is strange, and I'm the last person you probably want to see," she began, glancing around uncomfortably. "But there's something I need you to know. After the court ruling, I found out that Ben, the younger man I left you for, he's completely disappeared. He left, and he took everything. I lost my job, my savings, everything." She swallowed, her face pale. "I have nothing, Matt. And now I'm here because I've realized I made a mistake. I lost the best thing I ever had." Her words hung in the air, and I felt a mix of emotions, pity, anger, and an odd sense of closure. I watched her, unmoved by her plea, knowing that her actions had already left scars too deep to forget. Emily's hand reached out to mine, her presence a reminder of the love and stability I now had. "Amanda," I said calmly, "I'm sorry for what you're going through. But you chose this path, and I've chosen mine. I have a family now, a future I'm building. I wish you peace, but I can't be the person you turn to anymore." She nodded, eyes downcast, realizing there was nothing left for her here. Without another word, she turned and left, her figure disappearing into the rain. And as the door closed, I felt a strange peace settle over me, a final confirmation that I had moved on, and that my new life with Emily was exactly where I was meant to be. A year later, my life looked completely different. Emily and I were not just partners but a team, united in ways I hadn't known were possible. She had recently given birth to our daughter, and our days were now filled with baby giggles, late-night feedings, and the small joys that come with watching a new life grow. I had never felt more grateful, or more complete. One evening, as I was putting our daughter to bed, Emily gently broached a subject I hadn't expected. "Matt," she said, her voice soft. "I've been thinking about your ex-wife, Amanda, and the situation she's in. I know she made her choices, but it's got to be hard for her raising a baby on her own." I looked up, a little taken aback. I hadn't thought much about Amanda since that day she'd come to our doorstep. But Emily's words brought a mix of surprise and admiration. Here she was, my wife, showing compassion for someone who had done everything possible to hurt us. "What are you suggesting?" I asked, a bit unsure where this was going. Emily took my hand, her gaze steady and kind. I think we could offer a little help. Nothing big, just something to help her get by, at least for a while. I don't want her or her child to suffer because of her mistakes. Everyone deserves a little grace, especially when there's a child involved. I stared at her, feeling a rush of admiration. Emily was showing kindness where most people would have turned away. She had every reason to feel resentment, yet here she was, suggesting we extend a hand to my ex-wife. It was a rare kind of strength, one that spoke to the heart of who she was. The next day, I reached out to Amanda, offering her a small sum to help her get through those early days with her child. I wasn't sure how she'd react, but the gratitude in her voice was unmistakable. "Thank you, Matt," she whispered, a hint of disbelief in her tone. "I didn't expect this." "You didn't have to." "No, but it's the right thing to do," I replied. "This isn't about us. It's about the kids now. I wish you the best, Amanda." The call ended, and I felt a weight lift, knowing that I was finally at peace with the past. I turned back to Emily, who was holding our daughter with a gentle smile. In her, I had found not just love but integrity, understanding, and a compassion that was rare and true. Watching Emily with our daughter, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude. I was married to a woman who had every reason to feel hurt and jealous but chose kindness and compassion instead. She had taught me what it meant to forgive, to move forward, and to build a life worth cherishing. As I held them close, I knew that the journey, as difficult as it had been, had led me here. And I knew, without a doubt, that I was exactly where I was meant to be.